Now, I really, really do appreciate your endurance while I'm trying to preach through the book of Revelation. When we studied this in Sunday school, I thought there's so many good lessons here that we just don't really cover it because it's such a difficult book. And yet there's great spiritual lessons all through this book, and I decided I'm going to just kind of go through this book, pulling those out and bringing sermons on those spiritual lessons. I may not understand everything in the book of Revelation, but you don't have to understand everything in the book of Revelation to receive the spiritual benefit that is there with some of those things. So let's go to Revelation 13, and as you see on the board, I'm going to be talking about unlucky numbers. I just think it's ironic. I'd never noticed this before, but we all think, when I think of an unlucky number, I think of 13. You know, if it's 13, oh, that's an unlucky number. And I don't know the history of why 13 is such an unlucky number, but it's in Revelation 13, the very last verse, where we read another number that a lot of people say, well, that's an unlucky number. And that's the number, the way it puts it in the King James Version, it sounds very ominous. 603 Isn't that a scary number? 666. So to just kind of a little memory cue now, you can remember the last verse of Revelation 13. In fact, it's the last words of Revelation 13 is 603. So you got the unlucky number 13 and the unlucky number 666. And what are we talking about? And if you look at the bulletin, I start off remembering I've always enjoyed the Andy Griffith Show, and I enjoyed what Barney said one time. I think Andy said, "You're superstitious." And Barney, he came to his defense. He says, "I'm not superstitious. It's bad luck to be superstitious." And I've used that little expression a lot of times. And there's an element of truth in what Barney said there, because superstition cannot help you. There's nothing superstitious that is really you might do something, you might have a lucky penny, but if it's so lucky, how come somebody lost it? You know, oh, look, I found a lucky, well, it's so lucky and somebody wouldn't have lost it, would they? So how can you find a lucky penny and say, well, it's lucky then? Or maybe you look for a 4-leaf clover and think, wow, that is lucky. Well, it wasn't lucky for the clover, you just picked it, you know. So you think about superstition. It can't help you. This is kind of like, well, it's all artificial. It's almost like idolatry when you think about these things. The superstition can't help you. It can hurt you. It can hurt you because it'll pervert your thinking and cause you to do things maybe that you shouldn't have done, thinking, well, I'm going to be lucky now, or thinking this is unlucky, so I'm not going to do it, and it'll mess up your thinking. Superstition can hurt you. Now, you may have had things like this happen to you. I was paying for something in cash, and it wasn't just a week or two ago. I was paying something in cash, and the lady at the cash register rang it all up, and then when she saw the change I was supposed to get, she gasped. And she said, "I'm not going to do this to you." And she rang it up again. And I said, "Why did you ring it up again?" And she showed me the slip from the first one. First time she rang it up, I was supposed to get $6.66 in change. And she wasn't going to do that to me. Well, she takes this number, 666. To her, that is a superstitious number. My son was telling me about getting his tags for his automobile. And he walked in and was getting the license plate. And the clerk went over there and picked out a license plate, and she brought it over to him. And she was going to write the number down on his registration or whatever it was. She's taking note. And so she looks at the license plate, and the numbers on that license plate was 666. And she threw it down on the floor. And she went and got another license plate. All of this is unnecessary. If there's things in your life that you think, well, now this is going to be lucky, or this is going to be unlucky, that is not so. You are deceived by that. Jesus said ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And there's a lot of people that live in fear of things that they don't understand. And they think there's some kind of secret demonic force working beyond their comprehension. That I've heard of people that if they were going down the road and a black cat ran across, they're going to turn around and drive a different direction. You know, well, you don't have to do that. That's all imaginary. It's superstition. And God's truth, now, that frees us from those kinds of fears. And so knowing what is true, it frees us from so many things. One of the things it frees us from is the fears that accompany superstitions. Now, let's go into this and look at this in context. Revelation chapter 13. If you want to understand Revelation chapter 13, go back to Revelation 12. Let me remind you a little bit of Revelation chapter 12. It's the beginning of the second series of visions in the book of Revelation. And it begins with a great red dragon. Remember that? And we know who that is because he is identified in that chapter. This is Satan. This is the devil. That's what that dragon represents. And it is a fearsome dragon. But that dragon is powerless against God. Remember, he's going to devour that child as soon as it was born, and the child was snatched up into heaven. Well, it tried to chase it up into heaven, and Michael and his angels fought him back down out of heaven. So he tried to take out after the woman that delivered the child, and the woman fled to the wilderness. So he sent a flood of waters out of his mouth to drown the woman. Earth opened up and swallowed it. Now, I'm not going to go through all that again on what all that could mean or what that's about, a spiritual lesson there, but I know this. That dragon couldn't do anything. It failed everything it tried to do. And it really made the dragon mad. And so in Revelation 12 and verse 16, it talks about how the dragon was wroth. And then, in 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war. And now notice those words. Make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Those little words like that are kind of like benchmarks in Revelation. There's a lot in that I may not understand, but I know who the remnant of her seed are. They're those that keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Those are the saints. Those are the Christians. So other interpretations I might put on that or try to figure out, I know what that part is, see? And then we go to Revelation 13, and we read how the dragon is going to make war against the remnant of her seed, and how the dragon's going to make war against the Christians. Now here's what happens. Verses 1 through 8, we read about this beast that comes out of the sea. Now remember, this isn't a real beast. It's not the real sea. This is a vision that represents something. Let's read the vision first and get an idea. And this is an ugly creature. I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. And his feet were as the feet of a bear. And his mouth is the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power in his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. And his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshiped the dragon which gave power to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? You see that make war? Remember Revelation 17? He's going to make war with the same. Who's able to make war with the beast? Again, and there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints. Okay, remember what the dragon was going to do? Make war with them that keep his commandments, have the testimony of Christ. Well, here's how he's doing. He's going to do it through the beast. Make war with the saints to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindred and tongues and nations that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, so that's a fierce vision, isn't it? A great beast, ugly beast rising up out of the sea. And it looked like a leopard, and it looked like a bear, and it looked like a lion. Now, this is one of the things it's one of the challenges of the book of Revelation. How do you understand what that could possibly be? And why would it say something like that? And here's the reason so many times we get so lost in the book of Revelation. We don't know the Old Testament. If we knew, say that Revelation is the last book in our Bible. If we knew Genesis through Jude, and we knew that very well, and then come to Revelation, it's going to be consistent, but there's also clues throughout Revelation that'll remind you of something you've already read and something you already know. And this time it's in the book of Daniel. And one of Daniel's visions, and in the first part of Daniel, you know, we know the story about Daniel refusing the king's meat, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel in the lion's den, and some of those stories. The latter part of the book of Daniel has a lot of visions like Revelation does. Daniel receives a vision in the night. And in Daniel's night vision, he talks about the rising of these beasts that he sees. And the first was like a lion. And you go on and read, and behold, a second beast like a bear. And then you read, after this, I saw, and lo, another like a leopard. Doesn't that sound familiar? And then you keep reading, and he says this, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. Boy, that doesn't sound like a dangerous beast, doesn't it? Well, these beasts in the book of Daniel represented something. What did they represent? And someday we'll go into Daniel and study all this. But remember, Daniel had an earlier vision. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream? This great image that had the head of gold and the breastplate and arms of silver and the belly and thighs of brass. And what were the legs? Remember the legs? The iron. And you remember how Daniel interpreted that for Nebuchadnezzar? Thou, Nebuchadnezzar, art this head of gold. That's the Babylonian Empire. And after thee will rise another kingdom, and it won't be as great. That's the Persians and the silver. And then another king, there's the brass. And so history tells us, okay, here come the Greeks. And then another kingdom, and that's the legs of iron, the Roman Empire. And then we read about this vision of these beasts rising. Well, see, the lion, that's like that golden head. And the bear, that's like that silver in the breast and arms of silver. And the leopard, well, that'd be like those Greeks coming up. And then the beast with great iron teeth. Well, it's gone from the iron legs now to the iron teeth. The Roman Empire. As Daniel saw the succession of beasts arise in his vision, what did it represent? It represents a succession of kingdoms among men that would arise. Okay, if you remember that, and now you're reading in Revelation, and you come to chapter 13, and you read about this beast, and it's like this vision Daniel had. That gives you a clue, doesn't it? What are we talking about when we're talking about this beast in the book of Revelation? It's the Empire of Rome. That's what it is. The iron legs, the iron teeth. And now here's this beast coming up. It's the Roman Empire that had absorbed all of these kingdoms into itself. And so that would be something the Christians in the churches of Asia, being warned of things that would shortly come to pass, would need to know. That this empire under which they were under, it's going to rise up against God's church like a great beast to make war against it. And so it's representative of that godless government in Rome that they were going to have to face. Now, after that, there's another beast in this chapter. Okay? And we do this, we're getting the context now of the 666 and the mark of the beast. Okay? Let's look at the second beast. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. And the only description of it's right here. He had 2 horns like a lamb. 2 horns like a lamb. Now remember this. And he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven to dwell in the sight of men, and he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. Now I want you to notice what I've highlighted. 2 horns like a lamb. He's saying, worship the beast. Worship the beast. And he's deceiving them. Okay? Remember that. Let's go on to the rest. He's saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. What's the lamb doing? Saying, worship the beast. Worship the beast. He's deceiving them, and he has horns like a lamb. I tell you, false teachers, they like to look like a lamb, don't they? You remember how the Lord warned about wolves in sheep's clothing? And how the devil himself would appear as an angel of light? False teachers usually aren't angry, ugly men that are screaming out hateful things. They're usually somebody that looks very desirable and peaceful, like a lamb, see? But this is deceiving them. This is the false prophet. He's saying, worship the beast. You see, that early church saw something happen in Rome during the times of their Caesars that had not been with the earlier Caesars, at least nothing like the extent. These Caesars, during the days of the early church, started telling the people in the Roman Empire, you have to worship Caesar. That's right. If you want to be part of this kingdom and you want to function in this economy, you have to worship Caesar as a god. Nero did that. Vespasian did that. And they're the 2 Caesars usually associated here with the book of Revelation. And there are always going to be those that'll look like a lamb and say, you know, you just need to go along. What the culture says, don't oppose. You just need to drift right on along with it. Just worship the beast. Worship the beast. Anytime someone tells you we just have to go along with our culture, whatever it says, that's the way it's going to be. Whatever the laws, they've got to be right. I mean, Supreme Court said it, didn't it? It doesn't matter what Bible says, the Supreme Court says it does it, and you know I'm speaking facetious. And there's always going to be these false teachers that'll tell you, just go along with it. Just worship the beast. Make it easy for yourself. And that's what's happening here with the false prophet. Now, this beast is not called the false prophet in Revelation 13. But he is called the false prophet in Revelation 16:13, Revelation 19:20, and Revelation 20 and verse 10. We keep seeing these 2 beasts show up, but look, it's the beast about the frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon and out of the mouth of the beast and out of the mouth of the false prophet. We'll talk about that when we get there. But again, Revelation 19:20, the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet. And they were cast into the lake that burned with fire and brimstone. Revelation 20:10, there's the beast and the false prophet. They're in that lake that burns with fire and brimstone. And they'll be tormented day and night forever and ever. So when we talk about the beast and the false prophet, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about that ugly 7-headed thing that looked like a leopard and a lion and a bear. Now there's your beast. And then you're talking about that false prophet that looked like a lamb with horns. He's a false prophet. And so Revelation kind of helps us understand what it's talking about here as we go through that. Now, here's the part people know about in this chapter and they get so superstitious about. Revelation 13, 16 through 18. And he causeth all, both small and great and rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he have the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that understand count the number of the beast, for his number is the number of a man. His number is 666. So like 666, every now and then people they're gonna look at their driver's license and hope that number's not on there so they don't have the mark of the beast. You know, they'll look at their Social Security card and say, oh, I hope it doesn't have 6 on there. You know, I don't want the mark of the beast. As though that's going to somehow condemn them if that number happens to fall on them. Well, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. You don't have to worry about things like that. That's not what this is talking about at all. You remember when the trumpets were blowing and when the angel went out and marked 144,000? What'd that mean? It means the Lord's going to know who his are. And when the trumpet sounds and the terror comes, it doesn't touch the 144,000. The Lord's already picked them out. It's not a literal mark, is it? No, it means the Lord's taking note. The Lord marks them. He knows who they are. And so now we've got the mark of the evil. It's kind of the flip side of that. Remember, this represents something. Now, one of the things that I derive from this, and I think I've got this right, those who stay faithful to the Lord, they may have to suffer some economic consequences. It says they won't be able to buy or sell. Now, this is not Bible, but let me tell you about the commentators that they say on this, that to do your trades, you had to be sort of like licensed with your guild, and your guild had, well, a lot of time religious guild, and the guild would require you to worship the Roman emperor, make a sacrifice to him in order to kind of get your license to deal in that trade, and the Christians couldn't do that. See, so there are some economic consequences. Do you think there's ever economic consequences to being faithful to God? You better believe there are. That's one of the ways the devil tries to make war against the saints. Economic consequences. What about this idea? If you don't participate in this same-sex marriage, you're going to lose your business. Does that sound like economic consequences? That's not a new thing. That's been going on back in Revelation and even before. The devil comes up, and here's the two beasts. There's intimidation, and there is deception. That's what those beasts represent. And so Christians are going to suffer this. And if you're going to be faithful, don't be surprised if there may not be sometime economic consequences. The price you pay will be worth it. I promise you that. But sometimes that happens. So that may be part of what this is. But then we get to this, the number 666. What is that? Well, again, let's go to the commentaries. And there's different views on this. And one of the popular views is you take those numbers and you look at people's names and you assign letters, you assign numbers to the letters of their name and then add them all up. And if it adds to 666, well, that's who the beast is. And they can do that. And I forget what language. They go to different languages. If it doesn't work out in one language, they'll switch to another. Like if it doesn't work out in Greek, they'll say, well, let's try it in the Hebrew and see if that adds up. Or let's try the Latin and see if that adds up. And one of the names they come up with a lot of times is Nero Caesar. And so the beast here then would be Nero Caesar, according to that theory. And someone says, well, I don't think Revelation was written during the days of Nero. And so they go to another language and assign different numbers, and they add it up to Vespasian. And say, there it is. See, it adds up to that. And there's other people that think Revelation wasn't even talking about their time. And I think it was someone came up with this idea during World War II. Let's try that in German. And they came up with Hitler. Okay, so that would be the beast. And during the Vietnam War, I remember hearing on the radio, a fella went through this one time, and he came up with Henry Kissinger. He figured out that 666 was Henry Kissinger. Now, if you're a Republican, I want you to get the alphabet out and try different languages and keep figuring out. You might come up with Bernie Sanders, okay? Or if you're a Democrat, maybe you'll get Trump out of that. You know, you can. But listen, I've looked through all of this, and they all have it wrong. They're doing it wrong. Here's how you do it. Now, here's how you do it. 666. What's that add up to? Well, that adds up to 18, doesn't it? Well, what's the 18th letter in the English alphabet? Well, that's R, isn't it? You know someone whose name begins with R? It's Robert Horton. There it is, you see? 666, that's got to be what it is. And a lot of these things and trying to figure that out, it's just about like that. All right, so you've got to be, I'm real skeptical of that. The text says it's the number of a man. Now, in the Greek language, it's a little different than the English. There is a definite article. It doesn't say the number of the man. The definite article is missing. A lot of time when the definite article is missing, we write the indefinite article in there, the number of a man. But it could also read this way. It is the number of man. Well, let me just suggest, I'm not going to be dogmatic here, but let me suggest the number of man. You see, 7 in the book of Revelation is a number that usually means complete, perfect. And 6 falls short of that, doesn't it? The things of man fall short of perfection. It's 666. It is imperfect. It's inadequate. It's ineffective. It's the number of man. It just makes me think, look, you see all these awful beasts and all? Look, that's of man. Now, I'm going to offer that as a suggestion for it. I don't know that we know. I'll tell you this. If we needed to know more about the number 666 and what that's talking about, we would have been told more about that. Now, this letter was written to the Christians of the 7 churches of Asia. Remember, it was delivered by the angel of that church. That is a messenger going to that church. And though they had gifts of interpretation, they could explain everything they needed to know, and they probably knew things and explained things that are not passed down to us because we don't need to know. But they were told what these symbols mean so that they could understand. We know everything we need to understand. It tells us in 1 Timothy 3, 16 and 17, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God, that's the man who studies these things, he'll be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto every good work. That tells us we got all we need to know. 2 Peter 1 in verse 3, His divine power hath given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of Him that called us to glory and virtue. Now, if we needed to know more about 666, we would have been told more. You know, since we're not told any more about it than what we are, that lets me know I didn't need to know any more about it than what is told. And a lot of this is just speculation and guessing. But let me tell you, if you're worried about superstition, if you think that a black cat endangers you, or you're looking at the horoscope and you don't like what it says, or that number 666 shows up on your cashier's receipt or something, just remember this. You remember when the Lord was on this earth and how that at His word the devils trembled? Well, He could cast demons out of a man. There was no resisting our Lord. He says, all power is given to me in heaven and on earth. Now, I know who my Lord is. And I know who I serve. And he tells me, I don't need to be afraid of these things. He's got all that covered. He is more powerful than all of this. And so free your mind from superstition. Be a spiritual, godly person and have better understanding of things than that. It shows an ignorance of God's Word to be concerned about superstitious things. And so you don't have to rely on that. We know the truth. I want to look at this right here in Revelation 13, 9 through 10. This is right in the middle of the chapter, and I skipped this going through. It's between the two beasts. And here's where the lesson's going to end. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. Now that's a little bit of a cryptic statement in the middle of this chapter. What are we talking about? I tell you, it reminds us God's still in charge of all of this. That great beast who wants to kill with a sword, wants to lead into captivity, that's the one that's going to be killed. That's the one going into captivity. God's going to take care of all this. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. Remember when he talked to the 7 churches of Asia, he ended each letter to each of those churches. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. He that overcometh shall receive a crown of life. I mean, over and over, it's a reminder. God's taking care of this. Our job is to fear God and keep His commandments. God's going to take care of these things. And that is our patience. See, with that, we can endure. The trials of this life, we're going to make it through it. We're going to do fine. We will endure. That's our patience. And the faith, that is our confidence. The patience and faith of the saints goes back to our understanding that God's in control of this. We're going to be faithful to Him. I tell you, I don't understand all the book of Revelation, and I'm glad I don't have to. I understand all I need to know. When it comes time to pass out the marks, though, I hope God marks me as one of His and not of one that's not of His. This is the patient and faith of the saints. That's those that are separated from the sin of this world. How do you have that patience and faith? Here's how you do it. You hear and believe and obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what you do. To obey that gospel, you repent of your sin and confess His name before men, and you're baptized into Christ for the remission of your sins, and you come up out of that water with the determination, I'm going to serve Him all the days of my life. And then all those spiritual promises are yours. And so that's what I would invite you to respond to as we sing this invitation song.